Hello, George.
Hi, it's so lovely to see you.
Nice to see you. How are you, George?
Oh, excellent, excellent. I'm just finishing one conference, looking forward to a workshop, but this is the highlight of my day.
Thank you for participation in our conference also.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. It's always a pleasure, and it's an honor as well.
So I'm ready, or we are ready to listen your presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Kubarich, for your invitation, and thank you to all your colleagues at CEA and to all of our participants at this international conference on faith, knowledge, and doubt. And I'm wanting to speak about faith, knowledge, and doubt in relation to religious peace building, which is my subject, but also the subject on which Professor Kubarich has a lot of expertise, and her colleagues, Dr. Anna Zotova has published considerable amount, other colleagues as well. I'm wanting to take this opportunity to draw from the encouragement that I get from CEA partners. I always come away from these conferences with inspiration to tackle religious peace building, religious sociology of religion from new angles. So I'm hoping to also add that encouragement myself. And it's a subject on which there are increasing numbers of publications. There are many publications, many academic publications on religious peace building or on religion and peace building. And that's partly because faith is really valued. Faith is associated with many distinctive values, many distinctive forms of capital, maybe cultural capital, convening capital. Faith actors are everywhere. Faith actors have time. Faith actors are expected to play roles in conflict situations and in post-conflict situations. And the literature on this then is growing, but still has its limitations. And I draw on the work of Francis Davis, a professor in London, who has written in the Review of Faith and International Affairs that very often faith actors, faith-based peace actors, faith-based development and humanitarian workers are not understood in the academic literature or by diplomats or by the funders who fund them. And he says this is because the role of faith in action and the role of faith in people's motivation is complex. He tries, in his review article, he tries to give a map. He's got diagrams, but he tries to give a neat map, a picture map, maybe of the complexity for any faith-based actor engaging in a conflict, engaging in a situation from their faith or from many motivations. And so Francis is saying that we misunderstand these actors if we think faith acts by itself, or if we isolate faith from the other influences on our identity or our motivation. We misunderstand faith if we think of it in very simple terms or black and white terms. And I want to enlarge, in my contribution, I want to enlarge on that. So I'm seeing that the faith-based literature assumes a lot about faith. It's perhaps because of the education that we receive that we assume that faith means something explicit or clear or singular. And so I will return to that. And thinking of our faith, knowledge, and doubt trinity, the literature on religion and peace, on religious peace building, often assumes that we have a certain certainty in, if we approach conflict from a religious perspective, we have certain knowledge, we have certain faith or certain doctrine, or if we look at other religious people from a different religion, we assume that we can understand a lot about them by calling them Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, and perhaps that's where that initial error is something that we find difficult to move beyond. And then in this literature, which assumes a lot about faith and about certainty or knowledge, it doesn't say much about doubt. In this very large, increasingly large literature by academics who are really good academics, there's very little on the role of doubt in religious peace building. Perhaps one might wonder, is this because there's very little on the interior, the experience of religious peace builders? We look at them from the outside. We look at them as outsiders, perhaps. Perhaps we're not looking at religious peace builders as real people who are just as real as anyone else, experiencing the fears, the worries, the constraints, but we expect a lot of them, or we dismiss them as idealists because we're not really thinking about them as doubting, wondering, sophisticated people, real people. We're not thinking about what meaning is for them. There's little in this literature still that is comparative, and I want to reflect on that. I'd like to encourage much more of that work. There's little that examines our assumptions through comparative work, which is what comparative work is really great for. So we might assume a lot about Serbian peace builders, and when we begin to compare them with Lebanese peace builders, we might have new questions, and that's something that I hope that to see all the time, and I see very little of it. Of course, there is work that compares Cypriot religious peace building, for instance, with Northern Irish, and I don't see it moving beyond basic categories. And I think by choosing faith, knowledge, and doubt, there's a much richer comparison that one might come to. So I'm seeing that the work that SAD does, which looks from the perspective of the sociologists, which is objective, which attempts to be objective, it's an outsider perspective or an ethic perspective. I think that the work that SAD does is great in joining that with an insider perspective, with appreciation of the insider's perspective, an emic perspective, subjective, you might say, which appreciates the subjective, the power and the meaning of the subjective, which joining these two perspectives is crucial for a sociologist of religion today. Doesn't mean that all sociology of religion has to join these two, but I hope that our reflection here will kick anyone listening, including participants today, but if you're listening afterwards, I hope that you will be encouraged to see the value of a richer approach, which joins the ethic, which is what I will first focus on, the objective outsider perspective, and then I will look at the insider perspective, the emic, which is a subjective approach or a qualitative methodology might allow us to. So first of those two approaches is an objective approach, and many of us think this is a reductionist approach. And if you think of the media and the way that religion is treated in the media, it's very often quite distant from us. The religious actor who is seen as a conflict actor or seen as a distant patriarch, an important hierarch, an important religious representative, a pope, or a chief rabbi, or a chief imam, perhaps, the Reis al-Ulama, perhaps, the figure in a protest, the ordinary person, when they join a protest and they're pictured in the media, we see them as either secular or religious. And if they're marked as religious, if the journalist or the photographer is presenting them as religious, then we get quite a distant picture of them. And that might encourage us to think in polarizing terms. And I think that's one of the big disadvantages of the outsider perspective, the distant objective perspective. It polarizes us between religious and secular, or between our religion and the other person's religion. We assume things about our community. We assume other things through a distancing lens. We assume, or we know other things about other communities. And I hope the sociologist of religion understands what sophistication you need to overcome the assumptions that we come to the that we experts also come to the subject with. The outsider perspective is really good in one way, in that it focuses on actions, the protest, the peace protest, or the protest against an invasion, or the protest on behalf of an invasion. The outsider perspective is very good at casting a lens that is objective and external, and the outside perspective notices actions. It prioritizes, in our understanding, it prioritizes actions. So if we were to think, for instance, of the previous Bosnian race, who had a lot to contribute as a religious peace builder, a lot to contribute in his community, a lot to contribute globally in meeting with non-Muslims as well. The media, though, hardly picks up on that, by comparison with one speech that he made, which was very angry, and therefore which represented perhaps the least moderate aspect, the least temperate or patient aspect of his story, of which he also had much to teach. And one could think of that as being true for many religious peace builders who also have public face, and one doesn't see easily what lies behind their choices at these crucial moments when the media picks up on what they have to say, or when politicians pick up on how they represent themselves. So I'm wanting to say that there are strengths to that, but there are nuances which are harder to capture. In the demonstration that I'm thinking of in Montenegro, for instance, if you think of demonstrators who came out on behalf of one church against another church recently, what we know about them is what journalists say about them, what politicians say about them, perhaps interviews alongside those demonstrations. We're not imagining how much those demonstrators may have very different religious sensibilities. Perhaps they were always religious. Perhaps they came to religion. Perhaps religion is something meaningful to them in political terms. Perhaps they're very distant from politics. They're apolitical. And the camera captures none of that. The journalist is very good if they capture something of that. You can see that in Iraq, in Lebanon as well. It really takes someone with a grounding, a grounding in the diversity of a religious community, or the diversity of a community where people are religious and secular, to grasp that religion is not a simple or a clear thing for many of the people about who we imagine their approach to conflict or their approach to peace building. The outsider perspective finds it very hard to estimate the strength of someone's motivation to pursue peace. It is very hard to make any kind of estimation about someone else's motivation to pursue peace, and what they say in public. It's very difficult to come up with an objective assessment of whether that is a meaningful statement about peace, or whether it's just another politeness. So one needs a different methodology, not just the outsider methodologies. Religious peace builders, thinking of perhaps Bosnian Franciscan, it's very easy to imagine, it's very easy to listen to the speech of one of these great Franciscan peace builders in Bosnia and think that's very political, because they are very political. And for some listeners, the speech that they hear is not really religious, is they hear a Franciscan who they think is entirely political and not really a faith-based actor, not really speaking from their faith, but not really speaking from their religious knowledge, but speaking from a secular political stance. maybe a left-wing political stance. People characterize them from the outside in ways that these Franciscans won't characterize themselves, in ways they won't understand themselves. Perhaps they'll empathetically understand someone is critical of them or typecasts them, of course, because these are really sophisticated folk. And that's true of many religious peace builders who know that outsiders have perspectives on them. And religious peace builders, we think of them perhaps as a definite group, maybe a small group, maybe a small minority in Israel, a small minority in Palestine, or in Northern Ireland, a small and committed and determined minority who perhaps we think are very left-wing, very much a political minority. And the outsider lens encourages us to think of religious peace builders as very small groups who are idealists, who have no chance of influencing the rest of society on the whole, except at particular moments, except within particular sectors of society. And I think we need to bear in mind that this outsider lens narrows our understanding, sometimes deliberately, very often unwittingly, not deliberately at all, but through a lack of engagement with the variety of perspectives that religious people have and the variety of perspectives across society, where people do listen to voices that are committed, where they don't share everything that particular faith-based peace vision represents. We listen to Quakers, perhaps, in Britain or in America, regardless of whether we're Quaker or not. So too it is in Israel that a brave voice is listened to. Many of these brave voices are doubting, are sophisticated, are nuanced, and we don't have pictures of religious peace builders that tell us to listen out for perhaps an individual who's very motivated to use their religion for peace, but who also understands the most realistic arguments for defense as well. And that in Bosnia, in Serbia, in Croatia, Montenegro, there are many examples that I have in mind who are not included in the category religious peace builder sometimes, because they're seen as a realist, they're seen as a diplomat, a politician, a journalist. I'm thinking of Mohammed Yusic, for instance, who has been all of those things, and also who is an actor in the Bosnian Islamic community and a committed peace builder, often not, and that's often missed. If I was to sum up what the etic or the outsider perspective does, because of its narrowing lens and its distancing methodology, it underplays the numbers of religious peace builders, and it underplays their sophistication as well. I say that as a challenge to all of us. There's something to work against. And now I'm moving on to the insider perspective. As we might just think this is a subjective perspective, and very often it's tempting to dismiss insider perspectives as it's just one person's perspective. It's anecdotal. It may be that you've spoken to 50 Bosnian Muslims or 50 Israeli Jews or 50 Thai Buddhist monks, but that's such a small number. And they said some things that sound nice or challenging, but how do we really know what weight to lay on that? And so there is a role for the outsider methodology. The sociologist is needed, the political scientist is needed, but I'm wanting to add what is crucial, why we crucially need the more qualitative method: interviews, spending time with religious people, with religious peace builders, or with religious people for whom peace is important, but who don't see themselves in such important self-aggrandizing terms, who think more modestly and humbly about themselves. So there are things that these methods capture that are subjective. and are not just about an individual, I want to suggest. And I think, so I want to say something about faith and knowledge and doubt, which challenges us to compare. And I want to suggest that we're not just describing, our challenge is not just to describe an individual's nice ideas or eccentric, strange ideas. Our challenge is to use comparative methods to think about what's similar and what's different for Israelis and Turks and Cypriots and Bosnians, Northern Irish peace builders as well. And so here I'm wanting to start off by saying that there are some things about the religious peace builder that are not at all captured by the literature. And humility is one of those. The literature which compares religious peace builders doesn't look at humility as a resource, as a source of capital. And humility is really appropriate for religious peace building, because in a conflict situation, the conflict which is too big for us, the size of the conflict which is too big for communities or groups, it's those people who speak to the conflict must be humble. There is value to them being humble. And we don't know in a conflict situation, and also we don't know in a post-conflict situation, how long the bad situation is going to continue. We don't know the future. The future is unknown. And so humility is necessary, and humility and doubt are necessary, qualities of a religious peace builder, qualities of any peace builder. And religious peace builders often underline this, the added value that religion has in a peace building situation is humility, one added value. Another added value is moderation. And I'm thinking of the work of a Palestinian academic, Mohammed Dajani. I want to apologize if I'm looking down a lot. It's because my speech script is here. My notes are here. So I'm looking down at my notes, and you can't see that on Zoom so well. I want to share that so that you don't feel what's going on. So Mohammed Dajani has founded a religious peace movement, a Muslim religious peace movement called Moderation, or Wasatiyya. And in his view, the religious peace movement is not anti-secular, but embodies key factors, age-old factors in Muslim thought, but also in Greek thought. Moderation being an Aristotelian value and an Islamic value as well. Embrace of the other. It's another thing which religious peace builders are often motivated, extra motivated to do, because their sensibility is for difference. Whereas a secular peace builder might emphasize commonality, a religious peace builder will of course, emphasize commonality, but also may have a sensibility for overcoming difference. And that's a distinctive value that is missed in much of the literature. Strangely, because there's so much philosophy of religion which focuses on difference and otherness, that's nevertheless missed in much of the specialist literature on religion and peace, faith and peace. So faith, knowledge, and doubt, I want to encourage some thinking about what we would compare, what we might compare, while focusing on the individual and their subjective experience, or the community's experience. So to start with faith, and we might think in the literature that faith is presented as a simple thing. People of faith support the good and they oppose the bad. And so much of the literature uses that black and white perspective for very good reasons to promote the value of focusing on faith, the value of focusing on theology or doctrine or religion. And so it is often taken for granted that faith is an actor. Faith is a singular thing which acts. Faith does things. Faith is a power. Faith is a source of hope. And all these things may be true, And yet we also need to, they don't help us to understand real people who take up that faith, and don't help us to understand what faith means to real people, or how faith motivates action. We might assume a lot by hearing the speech of Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, the late Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, who spoke a lot about faith and conflict. Faith is being used for the bad, and so it must be used for the good. Jonathan Sacks popularized that. Now many writers take that easy phrase. And so what I want to suggest is, of course, we know that faith means many different things within a religion, within a denomination, across denominations. And for individuals, faith means very different things. And in our languages and in our cultures, faith is understood in very different ways. So to compare across cultures, languages, denominations is meaningful and valuable. It casts a lens on our assumptions. And to think about the ways that politics has shaped our understanding of faith. So we might think where the empire of the Ottomans has shaped discourse about religion, and it's shaped the way that religion is a political force. It's shaped the space for religious actors or faith actors or religious leaders across the Ottoman world, similarly across the British Empire, the French Empire, maybe going back further to the Roman and Greek empires, the Persian Empire. We might think of the shaping role of politics as a reason to compare, especially where faith gets involved in the political realm or in conflict, the bigger social realm, in the symbolic area of the social realm. And we need the emic perspective, the insider perspective, in order to say meaningful things about that, as well as the outsider perspective. If we were next to compare the way religious knowledge is treated in the existing literature on religion and peace, and to think what more can we do with more sophisticated sociology of religion, I want to suggest that we have an idea, very often we have an idea of the particular actors have religious knowledge, and ordinary people don't have so much of that religious knowledge. Particular actors might be Franciscans, they might be Jesuits, they might be rabbis, imams, the head of a religious college, a Protestant or a Catholic in Northern Ireland. And so we think that this knowledge is owned, and somehow it's separated from the knowledge that the rest of us have. And very often, when we don't see that in a conflict situation, it's puzzling, it's confusing, and we need the scholar or the journalist, the good journalist, to give us a better perspective on what is religious knowledge, what's the added value that religious actors bring, and is it from the past? Is it an ancient scholastic tradition or an ancient wisdom, or is it something to do with negotiating difference today? Local knowledge as well. If we were to think of a town or a village where Muslims and Christians have lived for a long time, and until conflict comes, and then the community is separated. Muslims are told to go one way, Christians are told to go another way. They're separated even after the conflict, and we think, how can we use the knowledge that there was a interreligious or multi-religious peace, a multicultural peace, but it's been broken? Is it just nostalgic to think that our knowledge is useful today? Or is that knowledge really an effective resource for building peace, for restoring community, for developing communities, the potential of community? We need a sophisticated scholarship to think about that nostalgia, to think what's effective, what is community, what's community building, what does it mean to all of the parts of that existing community and the community that has been broken. And if you're doing that work, I want to congratulate you, because we really need that work. And there's little of it, much too little of it in the literature. Doubt is the big topic that's missed in the literature. And we might think of scholastic traditions which talk a lot about the value of doubt. And I want to highlight that there are religious peace builders who use doubt a lot and who say that we religious people have a special grasp on doubt. Our told we're fundamentalists. We're told that we only think in simplistic terms, that we're only thinking about certainty. We are extremists because we think in terms of certainties, but that's such a misrepresentation of our Jewish or Christian or Muslim or Buddhist tradition. Actually, that's quite an idolatrous approach to think that we, small, humble human beings, have those certainties, when it's God who has those certainties. Our traditions don't, our medieval traditions don't teach us to be idolatrous like that. And so I want to highlight one figure among many who thinks along these lines, which is an Israeli rabbi, Moshe Halbertal. Professor Moshe Halbertal has been very important in the Israeli peace movement, especially the Israeli religious peace movement. And he says, we're told to support the movement Peace Now. And of course, we want peace now, but realistically, we know we can't have peace now. Actually, we shouldn't frame the struggle for peace as a matter of peace now, because we'll give up if we do. And our religious tradition teaches us to be more resilient, to be more steadfast, something he shares with Muslims, Palestinian Muslims, Bosnian Muslims, Serbian Muslims, something which our religious traditions push us towards, instead of the idolatrous urge to think that we can control our situation. We must know, and we do know, that we can't control our situation. We need to be in it for the long term. We're in for the struggle for peace for the long term, he argued. Not for peace now, but for peace as soon as we can get it, perhaps. So in conclusion, I want to thank you for listening. I want to say there's something that this insider focus, or this emic perspective, captures. It captures a richer picture of the range of religious peace building and of the strengths of religious peace building. One might say, if we only focus on the insider subjective perspective, on what religious people say about themselves, or on what religious people do as individuals or particular communities do, that risks appearing to avoid the hard political realities. So we do also need to focus on those hard political realities, on the way that religion fits into the hard political reality. Using comparison can check sweeping generalizations or sweeping assumptions or naive assumptions about the insider and about large groups, that large assumptions that come from a distant outsider perspective. So I'm hoping that I've persuaded you that the literature is limited, or that you'll go out and check yourself that existing academic literature on religious peace building needs much more of the work that CEA does, which is fantastic. And I want to thank you for inviting me to speak at this conference. I'm looking forward to hearing and reading the other contributions as well. I always love to read the volume that comes out. That the variety of perspectives and the thoughtfulness of the contributions is distinctive. Thank you very much. Thank you,
George. Thank you, George. It is wonderful. You say everything what is important about religion, about faith, and our knowledge, and our need for peace, and to be peace maker or builder. Thank you very much. And Liliana, maybe you have some question for George?
It's not essential.
No, thank you so much. It was really interesting, and I'm so glad that every time when you are giving a lecture to us, it's full of passion, and it's really useful to hear about your research and your experience. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Liliana.
Thank you, George, and see you next time.
Thanks.
Next year in our conference.
Hope so, and I wish you a great conference.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Thanks.